Welcome to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to start creating a lifestyle by design. From entrepreneurship, money and finance, taxes and residencies, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a true global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. Ahren, thank you for being on the show today. So before we dive in, please share with us a little bit more about your story, your journey, and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so hopefully I can summarize it in under 3 minutes. So I'm originally from Australia. I live in Canada right now. I've lived here for about 10 years. I've been in sales and some form of communicating to people to make an income for about 10 years. Basically probably about 3 to 4 years ago was that I was making lots of money. I just bought a 2018 Audi RS5. I thought I was crushing it. I was making 20 to 30 grand a month fairly consistently. And my anxiety was worse than it ever had been in my entire life. That led me to a point where I got invited to a men's weekend where they were using psychedelics as a tool to look inwards rather than as a way to escape one's reality. And that's the difference between some people saying drugs, which is what most of society uses that terminology around, which is a kind of escaping things like that, versus the term plant medicine, which some people who are not involved in that world just think it's some kind of other way of saying drugs. But one is used to escape your reality and the other one is to look deeper into it. So anyway, I went into this men's weekend and that kind of started I did a lot. I did a lot of different kind of ceremonies over the past 3.5 years. And coming out on the other side of that, I don't feel like I need that anymore, which is a really great place. And basically, I found out a lot of answers as into why I did certain things, why I was so obsessed with making money, why I never felt safe around making money, no matter how much money I make. And now, at 30, I turned 32 this year, my big passion is helping people the same way that I needed help 4 or 5 years ago. People who are really successful in one area of their life maybe feel stuck in another area of their life. So about a year ago, after seeing this transformation within myself, transformation within other people, I took a course so that I could actually get a certification to coach people who had been through a psychedelic experience, were overcoming addiction, whether or not any transformational event, whether it's a death of a family member, a new job, a baby, doing an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru. I've worked with a lot of people who are doing ketamine infusions for depression and anxiety, but I still work in sales. So I took a lot of this inner workings that I did and really wanted to sell differently and sell in a way that felt really good, that it felt like the start of a friendship with somebody versus this kind of one-off transactional feeling that I used to get that kind of came with an aftertaste of like shame and guilt because I know that I wasn't being in integrity with what I was selling at the time. So that's kind of a summary of where I'm at. Hopefully I did a good job at that.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And I mean, there's two directions that I would like to go in this episode, but since you ended off on sales, I think let's talk about genuine sales and authentic sales and what you're building now. And you've had years of experience selling cars and doing that successfully. So what have you learned from that? And then what have you pulled from that you are making this course about now that you have firsthand experience in for genuine sales and what that looks like?
Yeah. So I've sold all kinds of things. My sales career really started when I started selling personal training to people, which selling personal training is very interesting because it's not tangible. You're selling a dream. You're not selling a car where you can, hey, you can go touch this car. You're selling the idea of a reality that does not exist yet. So to sell that to somebody you really have to get into why they are sitting down in front of you in the first place. So you actually have to get usually quite vulnerable with them. And if you have not got vulnerable with yourself and honest with yourself, then you can't really be in a place to lead that interaction to help somebody become vulnerable with themselves. You can't take somebody to higher ground until you take them to common ground. And if you've never done deep emotional work on yourself, you'll always have like a handicap on you. It's just, I've seen it hundreds of times. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of salespeople in my lifetime come and go. And a lot of them are not in touch with themselves, and they want to manipulate and get just a skill set, but it's not actually genuinely who they are. So I sold personal training. I did that for a few years, and I ended up kind of losing passion for it, unfortunately. Then I went into the complete opposite. So I actually sold high interest loans. I sold loans that started at 30% interest per year and went up to 46% interest per year. So basically it's like financial heroin. So you can't really ever get off it. And the company that we sold the loans for would contact them close to the end of their loan and try to sell them another loan, therefore the person never really getting out of it. The reason I end up in this space for probably about three years I did that. And I was really good at it. I have gotten Canadians into probably millions of dollars of debt that they may not be able to get out of, which I've done a lot of work around that of why I ended up doing that. I just wanted to survive. I was so broke at the time. I was trying to survive. And I told myself a story that if I didn't do it, somebody else would, which is kind of the same mindset that somebody might sell heroin or meth or cigarettes or whatever it is, something that you know is not necessarily good for the person, but while the industry exists, somebody else is going to do it. I did that for probably about 3 years until the start of COVID, where it really started to change. The entire business model changed. Where I worked, fired 250 people in one day in March 2020. I was one of the best there, so I didn't get fired. All the commission structures changed, and I wanted to get out of there anyway. I was very anxious all the time. I was drinking so much caffeine. I was just not in a good place mentally, because how could I be? I was talking to terrified human beings that needed money to pay their rent, or their dog was dying, or this one lady wanted a loan so she could get a Chanel bag, and she made $3,000 a month, and she wanted to get a $5,000 loan. Just if you talk to it like scared, terrified human beings who are in scarcity for 3 years straight, 100 to 150 calls a day, that it really takes a toll on your mental health. So I was looking to get out anyway. And one of my good friends, Victor, was like, hey man, would you ever come and sell cars? So I've only been selling cars for about 3 years. But the 10 years of experience of selling other things, I went to a place where I was selling vehicles and I was genuinely helping people because they need a vehicle. Everybody needs a vehicle. If you want, it's a way of making memories with your family. It's a way of getting to work so you can make an income, so you can go on a holiday, whatever it is. So I felt a lot better about that. But I still noticed there was parts of me that would do things and say things to get a deal done with somebody that wasn't in integrity. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good at all. So during that time is kind of when I got invited, after about 6 months of selling cars, absolutely crushing, I got invited to that men's weekend I mentioned earlier. And that's when I really got to see that I'd created a false version of myself, a false self, this identity, this ego identity, which was Ahren, the car sales guy, Ahren, the salesman, who was actually hurting my true self, because my true self actually really deeply cares about people and I want to help people and I don't want to hurt anybody. But I'd hurt hundreds, if not thousands of people, I mean, directly and indirectly from what I'd done in the past. So that was a lot to feel. lots of pain to feel around that, as into why I ended up in that place in the first place. So that really started the journey of when you are doing anything, how does it feel? Because people pretend that they don't. You know more than you think you know of whether or not this feels good and in alignment, or if it doesn't feel good and is not in alignment. So I'm actually building a course right now. It's specifically for coaches, like transformational coaches right now, but I intend on doing it for every sales industry that exists, as in how it's called soul-centered selling. So how to sell from a place that feels good, but is also helping other people. Because if you really put people over profit, the amount of profit that will come in over the long term will blow your mind. But if you put profits over people, and they find that out, and they end up seeing that gap into who you pretended to be and who you actually are, then there's no referrals. They don't want to refer any business to you. It's a one-off transaction, and you constantly have to search for new clients, and you're constantly in this place where you can never actually build anything. So that's kind of why I believe doing your deep inner emotional work in regards to a small business, anything that involves sales, which is actually everything in life. The amount of people that have convinced me that they're not good at sales, they are selling me on why they are not good at sales. So like, here's all the reasons why I can't sell. I'm not very good at talking to people. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Listing all these features and benefits of why they cannot sell. And they then sell me on why they cannot sell. And I'm like, you just sold me on that. And they're like, oh. So every business, every interaction, every person you've ever met is sales, but not through the lens in which you may think it is, based on your current lens in which you look at sales at. So I want to help people change the lens in which they look at it through, so that it's actually can be a beautiful, great experience where it's the start of a friendship, an actual genuine connection, versus what most people think of as sales, which is you are taking something from someone.
I love that mission, and I totally agree. And on you saying that last part at the end, it makes me think. So when my partner and I started dating quite a few years back, after we had, our dates and we were together, I forget how it came up, but he was basically like, he's great at sales, and he always has been. And he was like, dating is sales. You are selling yourself to another person. And I was interesting. I had never thought of it that way, but it completely changed my perspective. And that puts into perspective that everything in life is sales, not only business. So you're creating this course of how to sell from a place of integrity and a place of what feels good. So can you share some of your tips, your resources through your many years in sales of what it looks like to sell from integrity and how somebody can go about selling from a place that feels good to them?
First of all, you need to change the lens in which you look at it through. So any person that's listening to this, even with what Nicole just said about the dating experience, if you had a voice inside your head of like, "Well, it's not sales," well, it's not your version of sales. It's a connection. And how can you connect with somebody else if you don't connect with yourself? So the basic premise of soul-centered selling is you got to get to know you first. So a resource, just this is off the tangent, I'll kind of put a bookmark on that. And the reason why I'm going to bring this up so I don't forget it, one of the best books I ever read, which changed my perspective about money and about serving and about giving, was called The Go-Giver. It's an amazing little book. It's a little red book. Actually, I might even have it around me. No, I do not. I put it back on the shelf. But it's this little book. It's written like a story, and it has these 5 stratospheric laws of success. And the 5 stratospheric laws of success go one by one down, as in, I might even pull it up here. Let me see if I can pull it up for you. The 5 stratospheric laws of success. Basically, it helped me realize of the way that I was looking at money and success in general was very warped. It wasn't reality. So here's some of the laws of success. So number one, the law of value. Your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. So what does that mean? It means that your worth doesn't come from how much money you make. It comes from how much value you provide to your customer, the world, whatever it is. Then there was the law of compensation, which is your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So this one blew my mind because I grew up that there was people that were really good in the world, and then there was people that made money, and they're not the same. And your income is not determined by how much of a good person you are, but it's really determined of how many people know you, which is actually, it's kind of the next law, that the income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So if you do a really good job, if Nicole does an amazing job at helping people relocate countries, help their visas, everything like that, people will pay them a lot of money. It's just how it works. The law of influence, which is kind of what I skipped to already, which is your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. So how you put other people above yourself and how many people that you're doing that for will directly tie into how much money you make. So for example, a teacher or a firefighter or a doctor, the amount of value they provide is a lot, right? But why don't they make as much money as a rapper that is talking about murdering people, doing drugs, and fucking bitches? Hopefully I can swear on this podcast. Well, the reason is because more people know who that person is and they've touched more people. So millions of people know who that person is versus a doctor, only a few people know who that person is. So it's not a matter of value, it's a matter of how many people know them. So it's not even a moral thing. Money's not moral. It's at all. People think it is. Like, well, I'm a good person. Why are they making more money than me? It's like, it's not about that. It's a neutral energy. So yeah, like your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests above your own. That's another law that I learned in this little book. The biggest one, which really, the last two were the biggest ones that hit me, is the law of authenticity. The most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. If you're in sales and you're trying to be Grant Cardone or Andy Elliott or any of these people that have these sales systems that are very famous and are blowing up and have been famous for years, and you're trying to copy what they say and it's not genuine to you, then you're not ever being you. And people will sniff that shit out real quick. If you're trying to be anybody else apart from yourself, you'll lose. But you can never lose being you, ever. The last one that really blew my mind, which was the law of receptivity. And in this book, he talks about, he does this exercise where he takes a big deep breath in with the person he's mentoring, and he gets him to blow out. So he's like, keep blowing out. I don't want you to breathe in. Just keep blowing out. And the guy starts going purple. He can't breathe anymore. He's like, don't breathe in. And the guy eventually takes a breath. And he's like, isn't it insane just to give and give and give and give and not expect to receive at all? Because what most of us have been taught is it's better to give than it is to receive. But if you're constantly giving, giving, giving in the world, putting your service, your product, whatever it is out there, and you're not actually open to receiving, you're being really arrogant. It's like, oh, trees, you can give us oxygen, but I don't want to give you, you don't, it's okay. Whatever. Like I can give you carbon dioxide, should I say, but I don't need your oxygen. You're shutting down the flow of life. Especially everybody knows somebody out there that you give them a bunch of, they give a bunch of gifts to other people, or you've got somebody in your family, your mom, your auntie, it's usually a woman, can be a man, And for me, I used to give and give and give. But if somebody would try to give back to me, I'd be like, no, it's okay. If you have that energy, you'll never be successful, ever. Because you're not allowing the laws of the universe to come into play. It's insane. It's insane to think that. So that little book, that little perspective that I just gave you in that little book and the lessons I got from that book, I've read it probably 50 times. That premise is what I based a lot of the course off. And that's a great resource. So to answer your question, that's an amazing resource.
Okay, interesting. So that's definitely on my list now. Thank you for that. I completely agree with everything you just said there, but there's something that I want to pull out that may be a little bit off topic, but you mentioned all the great sellers of the world, the Grant Cardones. I don't know who else you mentioned, but Grant Cardone stuck out to me because, and I'm curious your take on this. He's a great salesperson, very successful. I have his book, Be Obsessed or Be Average, which is a little bit older. It's 2016. I have it on my Kindle. I've been reading it over the last few days. I was reading it just last night and I actually just put it down and I stopped and I opened up another book. And his story is amazing. And what he has built is so inspiring, but it didn't resonate with me because it was, I don't know if you've read that book, Be Successful or Be Average. And the first, I think was like, I got until chapter 3 and I just put it down because it was all about you have to be obsessed with what you do, which to a degree I do agree with. But it was, some of the things that he was saying, and I can't remember off the top of my head what they were right now. It was very much so like you have to, like the cliches of the world of like, do something that you enjoy or take a break and relax. And it was like, I just didn't resonate with go, do what you need to do, get it done at whatever cost. And I found, not that I read the whole book, I only got until about chapter 3, but it didn't resonate with me because I resonated more with the thought process of, yes, you do need a break. Yes, I don't want to burn out. So I am going to have some other interests and be, to a degree, I guess, obsessed or really passionate about what you do and who you help and how you serve the world. But you can have other things that is not that one thing. So for me, that book just didn't resonate. You've read it. I'm curious your take, being in the field that you are in, of what that looks like for you.
It's a great question. I lived my life for many years with that mindset of like, more. You don't need rest. You don't want it bad enough. Toxically gaslighting myself with the bullshit that is fed to so many young men all around the world. Got to grind, bro. Don't want it bad enough. If you're not doing 60, 70, 80. Bro, I did 100 hours a week last week. Do you really want it? That doesn't work. You got to understand where Grant Cardone comes from. He's been an addict his entire life since he was very young. So all he did is he stopped doing the drugs and he took that energy, which that's how he's wired. He is wired that way. He took that energy and just channeled it into something that the world says is positive and makes him very financially successful. As he's gotten older, I've noticed he talks more about family and he starts feeling more. I watched interviews with people like Lewis Howes and him. He talked about his mum and he started crying on the podcast. And I was like, okay, this guy actually isn't just that manic workaholic kind of guy. For me, and I can only speak for me, is that workaholic grind. The energy that was feeding that is that I'm deeply inadequate. So if I go do these things on the outside world and make this amount of money and drive this car and look a certain way, then I'm enough. That's what I'm talking about here. Do you really want to go down that path for 20, 30 years, 40 years to realize that the driving factor of why you did things is you just wanted to hear, I love you, son. I'm so proud of you. Because I've had multiple clients that is all they've wanted to hear their entire life. Ultra higher achievers, people at the pinnacle of the people that have won awards, people that have been managers of massive sports teams that you would know, sports teams of with players that you idolize that have played in major events, whether it's the Stanley Cup or the Super Bowl or anything like that. I've talked to those people, and some of them, that's all they were looking for their entire life. So their achievement, what they wanted, was this deep emotional feeling that they never got. So that's Grant Cardone's great, but he's Grant Cardone. You are not Grant Cardone. You are not him. You can take principles. That's why in my course I want to teach principles, not methods, because there's an amazing saying which is, methods are many, principles are few, methods always change, and principles never do. It's a silly little rhymey saying, but it's true.
The only way this show grows is if you share the episodes you love and your key takeaways. If you've been loving this show, hit subscribe and leave a 5-star review with your favorite takeaways. We appreciate you, and let's get back into the episode.
There's principles behind communication and sales and just being a good human being, that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it doesn't matter what you sell, it doesn't matter who you are, these principles never change. The way that Grant Cardone is talking, that's his method. That's the Cardone method in which he goes about things. So you can read these resources and study these people and be like, okay, what are the principles that this person is saying? And how can I use those in my life without losing who I am trying to be this person?
Yes, I love your perspective. Thank you for sharing that. I totally agree. I think it works for him, and that's great. It didn't, I did take away, like you said, I just from those 3 chapters, I didn't really feel a need to continue reading forward, but I did take away, you do have to love what you do. And I don't want to say live for it, but what I do, I live this life every single day. I'm going to different countries. I'm finding out different tax loopholes, systems. It's something that I am passionate about and have been well trained in over the last 7 years. But is it the entire existence of my being? No, because I don't think, in my opinion, that would make me a very whole or well-rounded person, and I would probably look very burnt out. So on this topic, I'm curious your perspective as a man, as somebody who is in this field, and I think there's a lot of talk. Not that I have lived in Western society for almost a decade now, but I see that there's a lot of talk around women and the rights, but less so about men. So do you mind sharing what your opinion and perspective of that is, and how society can potentially be, I don't know the right word here, I want to say like underserving. I don't know if that would be the right word, but what that journey has looked like for you. You've kind of alluded to that in working with some clients, but I think we can go so much deeper, and I'm sure you have with yourself and with clients as well.
Yeah, this is what I love talking about. And yeah, where do I begin? I had a conversation with my dad in Australia about a week ago, and I have realized a lot about what it means for me to be a man and what I got and what I did not get. So my dad is a beautiful, amazing human being, incredible human being. What he's overcome is amazing. But I never had a safe masculine figure growing up in some ways. In some ways I did. He taught me how to communicate emotions. He taught me he loved me every day, because he didn't get that as a child. So he transmuted what he didn't get by doing a lot of work on himself, but he was still deeply unsafe. He just turned 70. He's never felt safe in his entire life, but that's his homeostasis. That's what he knows. So until you feel the opposite, you don't realize how unsafe he actually feels. So I have realized that I never had a truly safe masculine figure ever. I always felt, and I've always looked for older men or men that are more sure of themselves to tell me who I am as a man, because I didn't have that growing up. And that was my journey. That's why there's some movies out there like Lord of the Rings, for example. A lot of healthy masculine figures in those movies. They're not putting down women. They're not shitting on each other. It's very supportive. That's why I loved that movie growing up. And I didn't realize why I loved it so much. There's movies like Gladiator, which most men will watch that movie and they're like, I would like to be like him. Well, what's the archetype there? The archetype there is a man that he's willing to die for what he believes in. And a lot of men growing up, they don't have any initiation from becoming a boy into a man. Do you know what the initiation process is in Western culture? We're going to go get drunk at the bar. You're a man now. We're going to go to the strip club. Now you're a man. Do you know in other cultures, they have things like that all the men will take the boy from the village and the women will cry and they'll think he's never coming back. And then when he gets back from some kind of initiation process, it could be hunting a lion. It could be spending 2 weeks in the bush with a bunch of men, the older men teaching, hey, well, this is what it means to be a man. They come back to the village and the women of that village pretend not to know who their name is and have to get reintroduced to them, but they are now not the same person. We had initiatory practices for thousands and thousands of years. This current culture that we live in does not have it at all. So we have a lot of boys. This is what the patriarchy is, right? The patriarchy is boys trying to be men. What is boy psychology? Boy psychology is domination. It is unhealthy competition. It's like a boy that got power. You see it all over the world. You see it with world leaders bickering with each other. I see it in the Canadian government. I see it in the US government. I see it with people like Putin. I see it everywhere. People that are in China, running China. You have a bunch of boys that think that they are men, that they're not men. And that might be a big call and like, well, who's to say that you're the big man? I don't feel like I am completely. There's parts of me that still feel like a boy at times. But I've met real men, I call them real men, that have gone through some kind of initiatory process, whatever it may be. It could be almost dying. It could be losing absolutely everything. It could be whatever it is. But I see this world is that there's not a lot of people talking about this. So then culture creates people like Andrew Tate. It creates that, and people are like, oh, I don't like him. Well, he's one of the only people that was talking about, hey, I'm here for young men. What do they need? What do they want? So whether or not you think he's healthy or not, he said some things I agree with, and he said a bunch of shit I don't agree with. But if you look at why somebody like that blew up so quickly, it is a societal symptom from nobody talking about these men or these young boys having any initiation processes, having healthy masculine figures. So they're just looking for something. They're looking for something. A healthy masculine figure isn't your dad that sits on the couch watching football and not going after his dreams. I'm sorry. That sounds harsh. It's true. And the reason why it might bother you is because it's true. A healthy masculine man does not avoid anything, including himself. So going down to emotions. If you are a man that cannot cry, then you're avoiding yourself. You are hiding from yourself. You wouldn't be given these emotions unless you were supposed to feel them. So if you can only feel anger, and that's the only emotion that you can feel, you are not the most holistic version of a healthy masculine figure because you can't feel the vast array of emotions. But for so many years, you're like, that's a man, son. A man bottles it up. And you have people, I saw a video on Instagram the other day of Shaquille O'Neal saying he never cries, he never shares his problems with his woman. I don't think that's a man. Yes, he's achieved a lot, amazing, cool, whatever, in a particular arena. Is that man holistically successful in my opinion? Absolutely not. And my goal is to, first and foremost, be a holistically successful man, emotionally, relationally, physically, financially, and spiritually. But there's a lot of men out there that are only successful in maybe one or two of those arenas. Maybe they got a shit ton of money, which is what most people define as a successful man. But if you're really overweight, or you treat people like shit, or you're speaking really horribly about one gender or another, or you have any kind of hate in your heart, I don't think you're holistically successful. And that's what doing all this inner work did. And I'm not coming from a place that I'm better than anybody else, because I'm certainly not. It's a problem that I see in the world that I talk to so many men, and it's they all feel their own version of what I'm talking about. Whether or not they can articulate it the way that I'm articulating it, there's a lot of men that just are living a life of quiet desperation. And they don't have anybody to talk to.
I think too, and I'm curious your perspective on this, when you're mentioning those 5 areas to really be successful, I'm thinking about the men in my life, yes, but I'm also thinking about myself and my female colleagues and friends. And I would hold everybody to, and of course it looks somewhat different, but I would hold everybody to, if you are overweight, if you are not really going after your goals. And that doesn't mean having to be obsessed, quote unquote, and get completely burnt out, but doing it in a way that looks healthy for you. That is for anybody, in my opinion, who wants to go after true success and a truly authentic life.
Yeah. You have to define what success is to you. Success to you could mean, like I've worked with clients, like what does success mean to you? I want to be a stay-at-home mom and raise my kids and love them as much as I possibly can. Cool. I talk about men because I'm a man, and all those principles go for absolutely anybody. And this whole kind of gender confusion thing that is happening with, it's not even confusion. What I see it as is a natural evolution that is happening in our society globally, especially in North America, based on a Christian perspective or a religious perspective that has been around for thousands of years of this is what a man is and this is what a woman is. And if you don't fall into that, then you're not a man. So growing up in the hometown that I grew up in, for example, if you didn't play football, you're gay. Like if you play piano or play the clarinet or want to do anything else or do any other kind of thing, you're not a man. Like you're either a man or you're gay, which was wild growing up with that, or you're a pussy or whatever. And then there's women that if you aren't really feminine in like want to wear dresses and do all this and be that way, then also you're not a woman. Then now you're a man. And now there's all this kind of things that are happening in our society. And I see that as if you zoom out 30,000 foot out, is that people are trying to break free of what people have said it means to be a certain way. So all of these principles are applied to whether or not you have a more masculine energy or a more feminine energy, because there's amazing human beings out there that have achieved great things that maybe are born a man, but have more feminine energy. But it doesn't mean they're not a man. Like Elton John is a man. He's a man. That is a man. But then there's people out there that Andrew Tate is a man. They're just different versions of what it means to be a man. So I see this whole thing that is happening. That's the healthy version of, okay, we're breaking free, but there's also a lot of unhealthy things that are kind of weaved up into that. A lot of weird shit that is happening as well, which I don't agree with. But going back to these principles, all these principles you could be applied to anybody. Woman, man, whatever you identify as, everything in between, is if you are not successful in one area, if you're successful in one area of your life, so you got a lot of money, but you're just vaping every day and you're drinking every weekend, you're not successful. I'm sorry you're not. But we live in a society that worships that. And then they think they're successful. Well, I'm a successful guy. No, you're not. Sorry, not in my world. Not the way that I define success. And I want to work with people that feel like they may be successful in one or two arenas of their life, but they don't know how to cry, or they think it's weak. Well, I don't cry. You got plenty of things to cry about, bro. Like plenty. I can promise you. And by not shedding those tears and actually feeling what you need to feel, you're actually holding yourself back from making more money. Like it's wild when you get into that kind of stuff and feeling good about how much money you make. Or even the fact that I worked with people for so many years at the gym, and my friend Marcus and I were talking about that discipline is actually bullshit. And he said that to me. He's like, discipline's bullshit. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, if somebody can get to like the root of why they are 300 pounds in the first place, and what part of themselves did not love themselves, what part of themselves got them to the point where they're like, I don't love myself so much that I'm going to allow myself to be 300 pounds. If you can really get to that place and really start loving that part of yourself that has been hiding for maybe decades, that maybe didn't get love when they were a little kid because their parents fed them shit, and you can start loving and reparenting yourself by doing the inner work, you don't need fucking discipline. Going to the gym is now an act of love, not an act of discipline. Because when I think of the word discipline, I think of like, I gotta be disciplined. Gotta get on the grind. It's like it's not coming from a place of love. So all these things, I talk about this in selling. I talk about this with my clients. It's like, hey, it's actually all you. All these things that you think might be out there, a lot of it can be solved with really being honest and really not hiding from the parts of yourselves that you're hiding from.
Yeah, so on one last topic that came up when you were just speaking about the gender identity, I guess, in the culture that you live in and the culture that I'm from, Western culture, it was so interesting to me. So I lived in China for quite a few years, and that was really the first time that I saw men acting different, because in Western culture, it's very much so you can't cry, you can't, even so, we would go to dances growing up as kids. I'm sure you did as well. And it's like the boys don't dance, the girls dance, and then the boys just sit there and they cross their arms and they look cool, And so, I mean, I saw it in China. I also see it in Mexico. So my partner is from Mexico, which is a very different culture. And here, of course, dance and salsa and bachata is such a prevalent part of their culture. And they will have just family parties and all the men are up dancing and all the women are up dancing and they have balloons and they're like bopping the balloons around and the men are like doing the footsteps for salsa, which I don't know. And my partner will teach me because he knows. And it was such an interesting culture shock to me when we first started dating and when we came to Mexico, because it was like, oh, you dance? Like, that's so different from what I know. And then in China, I would see young boys, very normal in their culture. And in a lot of Asia, young boys, they have their arms around each other and maybe they're holding hands or their arms are linked as they're walking down the street. And it was so different. And those are two specific instances that I remember because that is not at all what I saw growing up. And and that's what I love about being a global citizen as well, is you have to reprogram your mind into there's not only one way to do things. And actually, I think a lot of other cultures have it figured out a lot more than Western culture. And that's why right now Western culture is kind of going through a little bit of a crazy time.
100%. If you did that in the town that I grew up in, if you danced salsa or tango, I grew up in a town in Western Australia called Albany of about 30,000 people. Or if little boys had their arms around each other and were walking along holding hands, they would have been called a faggot, gay, pussy, don't do that, any kind of version of that. And men want to connect with each other. They want to connect with each other. Like, the amount of guys that just want a hug from another dude. Hey man, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're crushing it. Keep going. Let's do this. Like, you're like, oh, I don't want a hug. Yes, you do, bro. Like, shut. Yes, you do. Hugs are great and they feel good. Oh, I don't like guys. Bro, chill out. Like, it's all good. I'm not saying you like guys. I'm just going to give you a hug. I've seen guys just struggle with it because they've got this construct in their mind that you can't do that. And if you do that, then there's something wrong with you. But they're craving it. Humans crave connection. We crave connection with other people. You see women greet each other in most societies. There's usually some kind of touching or hugging or hey, like something like that. But with Western society, it's just so lacking. It's starting to change now. There's people talking about it, and I plan on being one of those voices of being like, hey, you can be a savage and make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, or like I'm into jiu-jitsu, I love martial arts. Like you can have the ability to literally kill somebody with your hands, but you can also tell your friends you love them and tell them how proud of them, give them a hug, and you can cry with them. You can do all this stuff. You can be an absolute savage, but you can also write poetry and play music and grow flowers and grow vegetables. And like you can do all this stuff. That's why I loved Lord of the Rings growing up so much. I loved it. I got the guy's tattoo. I got the guy's signature tattooed on my arm. The guy that wrote the books right there. And I didn't understand why it impacted me so much. It's because it's full of that. It's full of these men loving each other, hugging each other, crying with each other, doing some amazing big thing in the world. And there's no like, oh, you're a bitch, bro. There's none of that shit. You're not grinding, bro. Like this kind of toxic boy masculinity, which has been around in our culture for such a long time, that is so deeply ingrained that we just think that's what being a man is. No.
And I also think, too, it's interesting from a female perspective. Obviously, that's the only perspective that I can speak from. But from what I have seen firsthand is men will think that, oh, if I cry in front of any woman, it doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or not, I'm going to seem weak and stupid and vulnerable. But me, and I would say probably at least 90-95% of the women that I know in the circles that I'm in, which, you know, maybe not every woman would pertain to this, but if I see a man crying and showing emotion, I will immediately see you as honestly higher. You know, you are more emotionally intelligent. You are able to express yourself and not feel ashamed about it. And then actually, I find you can have more of a connection with that person, whether it's a friend or someone you just met or someone you're in a relationship with. Because in my mind, I can respect you that much more because you're not afraid to show your emotions, and it doesn't make you weak. It just makes you a human being.
Exactly. It's real. It's real. I've said this. Imagine if I used that same psychology that is projected out into the world because I can cry and I can feel this. Imagine if I use that same psychology. It might sound something like this. Oh, bro, you can't cry because you think it's weak? That's pathetic, dude. You can only feel one emotion, which is anger when you get upset? That's pathetic. I can feel way more than you, dude. It's like, oh, you can't do this, you can't feel that. Oh, you can't feel your emotions? That's pathetic, dude. Like imagine if I used that same energy, which is the weakness around crying, as a way, as another, like weaponize it. That would be really mean, but that's the energy that it is. And I say this to men as a challenging way, and I could say it to women too. Like I say it as a man, but a real man or woman does not hide from anything, including their own emotions. So if you can only feel certain emotions and there's these blockages there's a part of you that is so closed off or so scared of feeling those emotions because you're scared of feeling the pain, which is it's like the hard exterior for something that is really painful on the inside. So people become like, yeah, I don't do that. I'm not crying. I'm not weak. So that story, which is, if I feel this, therefore I am weak and I don't want to be weak, that is the structure. It's like a Ferrero Rocher. I mean, that's the hard structure around the outside, is if I feel this, I'm weak. So imagine a concrete Ferrero Rocher. So the outside is made of concrete and the inside is gooey sadness or whatever it is, or tears or whatever it is. So many people, men and women. Yes, you're around women that don't think that men are weak, and you think that. There's millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions, of women around the world that grew up with a father that talks that way about men. Therefore, the man that they are with is usually, this is true for men and women, a lot of men and women marry their mother or marry their father. They just do. It's because, why? Why? I don't want to do that. Well, if you grew up, your subconscious only knows one way of looking at a woman or a man because that's what you grew up with. So you'll end up probably somebody similar to your mum if you're a man, or as your dad if you're a woman. So these things are just things that happen. So you ended up with a man that probably could cry around you because you have a healthy view of it. But there's a lot of women out there that if their man cries in front of them, they think that they're weak and that they're less of a man. Therefore, perpetuating the whole shit that is wrong. Why do men commit suicide way more than women? Because of these things. Oh, I can't feel this, I'm weak. You do that for a decade, 2 decades, the person's like, well, I'm done. See you later. Yeah,
You know what's so interesting too is I would be so curious, you doing your work down in Latin America. So right now I'm in Mexico, and yes, I did just say that the culture here, it's so interesting because the culture here, yes, men can dance and express themselves in certain ways, but also there is the machista culture, which is the very traditional men bring in the money and men are the ones who have any sort of say in the family. I would say very traditional, maybe like 50s, 60s, 70s of Western culture is still, and it's changing. Actually, it's changing a lot because of social media. I was just having a conversation with one of my Mexican friends about this. It is changing because of TikTok and social media, but that's a slow change. And especially in the older generations, the machista culture is very prevalent still in Mexico. So it's interesting because there are certain expressions that men here have, like dancing, that men in Western cultures, it's not so accepted. But then I feel like men in Western cultures are a lot more awakened to what you're saying. Whereas if you were saying that to a Mexican man, not all of them, of course, but a lot of them, it would be a complete revelation for them. And it's something that is just not prevalent in their culture at all. And they would have no concept of, I can cry in front of somebody and I can have this heightened emotional intelligence. And that is why, unfortunately, in this culture and a lot of other cultures, there's domestic abuse and there's violence because that's just how the family relationships are.
Yeah. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying if you're a man to cry all the time because you feel a little bit sad, or to be this emotional roller coaster up and down. Sometimes you have to suck it up and do what is required to do. There's lots of sad things out there, but you got to do what needs to be done. But if you don't allow yourself some space, it's like, are you building a dam or are you a river? I want to be a river where I'm not building these dams that I build for years and years and years of my life, and then all of a sudden it ends up something being unhealthy, like drinking every night, or every time I get frustrated, I need a cigarette. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about emotions. I see feelings as, I feel happy today. So it comes and it goes. I feel sad right now. I see emotions as, feelings is like the surface of the ocean, and emotions are like the deep undertows, the deep currents. You have to feel your emotions, because if your emotions build up for too long, they will wreck your life. They'll ruin it. Or beliefs about yourself. I've seen people that have got their dream partner and she's just absolutely perfect, but they fuck it up. Do you know why? Because they don't feel like they deserve love. They don't feel like they deserve this stuff because they think so lowly of themselves. And this person loves them so much, but they'll literally sabotage it and not know why they're doing it. That's what I'm talking about. And every person has their own version of that. It could be, for me, for example, I talked about making all this money, having the Audi and everything. I personally right now am rebuilding my financial situation because about 3 months ago, I was like, oh, I'm addicted to feeling unsafe, addicted to it. My drive came from feeling scared. So do you know what I did when I made a bunch of money? It would be spent. I'd go on a trip. I would just find little ways to spend it. It's really easy to spend 20 grand in a month. Easy. You just buy nicer meals. It's crazy. It's crazy how easy it is to spend it. Silliness. But yeah, I was addicted to feeling unsafe. And my journey over I'm turning 32 this year, is by the time I'm 40, I have a plan now. I have things I want to achieve. What I have to get used to personally is me sitting with the discomfort of stability. That's actually uncomfortable for me. If I've got 50, 100 grand in the bank, looking at that, I would feel uncomfortable. Why would I feel uncomfortable? Because I'm not used to that feeling. I grew up with parents that had a lot of scarcity around money and didn't have much of it. So that's my normal. That's my emotional kind of home. So when I have the complete opposite, which is abundance, I get uncomfortable with that because I'm not used to it, because your brain attracts whatever is familiar. It's like I've had clients that live in filth, like actual filth, like rotting food, can't brush their teeth, can't have a shower. And that person is scared of leaving the house because they might catch something. It's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Where whatever your emotional home is, that is familiar to you, even if it's hurting you. So, like, I can only speak about myself. My emotional home was scarcity, shame, be small. Around money, go spend it, go make more because you have no drive unless you're scared. Versus coming from an abundance place of like, hey, one is pushing you, which is the fear, and the other abundance is pulling you. I don't want to be pushed anymore, back against a wall. I want to be pulled by what my goals and my dreams are, versus being so scared and so in scarcity mode that I'm forced to, and that's where my drive came from years. And you can only do that for so long. That's what burns people out. That's what fucks people up, is that kind of energy. Versus, I think Grant Cardone is talking about the pulling energy of you can't really get, I don't know if you can, maybe you can, but you don't get burnt out as easy if your dreams and the positive stuff and the idea of that's pulling you. I think the fear will really burn you out because your nervous system can only be in fight or flight for so long until it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Screw you. You need to go to sleep for 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, this has been a very interesting conversation. We could talk about money and go on
Anything.
that whole topic for another
Yep.
hour, but maybe that'll be another episode. Where can people find you online?
Instagram is probably the best place. I'm currently building a website right now, but it's not launched yet. Instagram, just Ahren Lynch-Potter, Ahren, Lynch, Lynch, and then Potter. I post there quite often. I've got a podcast called The Mental Dietitian. I'm about to record my 100th episode today. I talk about all this kind of stuff. I've had UFC fighters on there. I've had people that make millions of dollars a year. I've had top comedians, all different types of people. And I've tried to find the commonalities between each one of these people that are successful. And it's all the same. It's all the stuff we've been talking about. Whether or not they consciously realize it or not, that's what's got themselves there. Is being honest with themselves, doing the work. Yeah, talk a lot about emotions. I talked about psychedelics on there, my journey with that. So yeah, that's where you can find me. The links for my podcast are on my page, or you could just Google the mental dietitian. You'll find it. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Ahren.
Thank you.
You've just listened to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. If anything from this episode resonated with you, I would appreciate if you share this podcast on your socials. And of course, be sure to tag me. And don't forget to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me on this global citizen journey, and I'll see you in the next episode.